Welcome to Bharat Chintan. We mix bold ideas, sharp stories, and desi truths. From ancient epics to modern chaos, we flip the script and ask the real questions. Listen in, think deep, and share the spark. Namaskar. Has scientific research finally provided the most unexpected proof for the Mahabharat? I know your time is precious, so I'm promising you right at the beginning that I will tell you the best places where you can take a break so that you can come back another day without losing continuity. Now, there is a phenomenon called the Y chromosome bottleneck. You have seen how bottles become narrower as they move towards the mouth, isn't it? That restricts the flow of the contents. A Y chromosome bottleneck is a period of reduced genetic diversity in the gene pool. We know that women have two X chromosomes. One comes from the father and the other comes from the mother. Men have one X and one Y chromosome. The X chromosome comes from the mother and the Y chromosome comes from the father. Now, if a young man dies without having sons, what happens to that Y chromosome? That Y chromosome, which should have passed from him to his son, never gets passed because the son was never born. That means that Y chromosome has got wiped out from the genetic pool. That Y chromosome is finished, wiped out. An entire lineage, poof, gone. Now, disease, accident, war, the reasons could be anything, but the result is that the Y chromosome is gone forever. Now, if say 1,000 young men die without sons, all those chromosomes are gone forever. Now, this is essentially what the Y chromosome bottleneck, reduced diversity of the Y chromosome bottleneck, tells us. And this has been discovered by scientists. Something happened, and suddenly there were far fewer Y chromosomes across continents than there should have been. It happened across Asia, Africa, and Europe. What happened? How did it happen? There are speculations and theories, but there is no definitive answer. Let us understand what is known about the Y chromosome bottleneck before we go into its connection with the Mahabharata. What we know is that the Y chromosome bottleneck happened around 7,000 years ago. That correlates to the period around 5,000 BCE. It is estimated that at the peak of this bottleneck, there were 17 women to one man. Meaning, suppose the population is, a total population is 18, then out of that, 17 would be women and only one would be a man. Stanford, which is one of the universities which is involved in this research, has proposed a theory that it was wars between clans. That was the phenomenon which drove this Y chromosome bottleneck. Clan wars? Doesn't that mean wars between different sections of the same family? Have we heard of any clan wars in our Itihaas? Mahabharat was a clan war, wasn't it? It was fought between the branches of the same family. Anyway, we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let us first understand the numbers. The numbers were brutal. What makes the picture stark is the thought that there was only one man for every 17 women. Can you imagine what would happen if there was such a gender skew today? There would be total chaos. The question is, why do scientists propose the theory of a war rather than natural disasters or epidemics? The reason is that in any history, anywhere in the world, there are no events that have been known to be gender specific. epidemics, natural disasters, they act indiscriminately within the community, within the population. The only feasible explanation is a war, because war is primarily fought by the men of the species. I have tried, and I can't think of any other reason too, or even a set of reasons that could cause such a disaster in such a short period of time. That to a war or wars that happened across a vast geography, Asia, Africa, and Europe. Now, this is what the Y chromosome bottleneck research tells us. Of all the points we have seen about the Y chromosome bottleneck, there is one that we should be looking at, the last one, which is the theory that scientists are proposing about the reason. We know that there was a massive war, it was big enough to impact the human genetics, and that it happened 7,000 years ago. Now, what was Earth like 7,000 years ago? What was civilization like 7,000 years ago? What was happening in the world 7,000 years ago? Was such a massive war even possible at that time? These are obviously the questions that pop up as soon as we think of something that far back in time. Before we answer this question, I promised that I would tell you when is the best point to stop. Pause. This is the first such point. We have touched upon the genetic collapse that reshaped humanity. We have encountered questions that need to be answered for it to make sense. Take a break now. Maybe grab a chai biscuit if you need to, because next we are going to challenge the timeline of history itself. Let us take a step back and recall what we were taught in school. Stone Age is considered as prehistoric, where there is no written history. Whatever we know about it is actually surmise and conjecture, because very scarce archaeological discoveries in different parts of the world have been uncovered. It is supposed to have lasted for about 3.4 million years, ended somewhere around 4,000, between 4,000 to 2,000 BCE. It was followed by the Bronze Age, which was supposed to have lasted between 3,300 BC and 1,200 BCE, which was followed by the Iron Age, which lasted between 1,200 BCE and 550 BCE. After the 500 BCE period, we have a lot more evidence, written as well as archaeological, and that is why we call it the historic period. Now, if the Y chromosome bottleneck happened 7,000 years ago, where would it be in this timeline? Let us imagine. Now, this is too difficult to visualize, so let us build a timeline picture. See this picture? Now, when you see this picture, something doesn't add up, does it? Can you see the discrepancies and conflicts in this accepted timeline? The timeline of the ages, which we were taught in school, the genetic data that researchers have discovered, and their surmise that it was clan wars that caused the bottleneck, these are simply contradictory. Either Stone Age ended long before what is currently accepted, or wait. Let us think this through logically, shall we? Now, massive widespread war is supposed to have caused the Y chromosome bottleneck, right? Now, why do big wars happen? Disputes arise because of properties or possessions. The more the property and possessions, the bigger are the conflicts. Now, small groups might fight, but those are generally confined to a small region. The it is only when large populations assume a collective identity that the sense of ownership is stronger and the determination to defend those properties against other group is that much stronger. Now, if a massive war had to happen in this bottleneck period, it would necessarily mean that 7,000 years ago, there were large collective identities, right? But did they exist 7,000 years ago? So let us flesh out the period around 5000 BCE. We know that 5000 BCE falls in the last part of the Stone Age. This period is what is called the Neolithic Age. Neolithic Age started somewhere around 10,000 BCE and ended with the end of the Stone Age. Now, what does that tell us? It tells us that the Y chromosome bottleneck happened after the beginning of the Neolithic Age and before the beginning of the Bronze Age. Now, what else do we know about this period? We know that around 3000 BCE, the population of the world was around 25 million. Now, since we are looking at the period about 2000 years before this, maybe the population was slightly lesser. Let us assume that it was 20 million. Now, what was the size of the communities? We are told that the biggest communities could be anything between 50 to 3,000 people. There. Again, we have come to an insurmountable hurdle. I mean, if the largest communities were 3,000 or so in size, where is the large collective identity which is the prerequisite of a big war? Now, small skirmishes between adjacent communities cannot be called wars, nor can they cause widespread genetic devastation across continents. And that is what is indicated in the Y chromosome bottleneck. Now, our area of interest is Asia, Africa, and Europe, which have a combined area of about 85 million square kilometers or 32 million square miles. Now, today there are about roughly 7.3 billion people living in that area. At that time, there would have been about 20 million, which is actually 0.27% of the current population. Can you imagine how sparsely the world would have been populated at that time? And right there we have another contradiction. If the world was so thinly populated, the distances between the settlements would have been vast. How could any big war or many similar wars have happened across 3 continents at around the same time? So big that they wiped out 3/4 of the men. So now we have 2 facts that don't match the evidence of the Y chromosome bottleneck. Now, since the Y chromosome bottleneck cannot be disputed, we have to question the facts. Either we have to accept that the world population that we are assuming 20 to 25 million is wrong, or our assumption about the size of the biggest communities is faulty. If you have made it this far, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. This video so far explored the phenomenon and compared it with what we have accepted as facts in the timelines of human history. Feel free to take a pause here. This is a good moment because in the next section, we are going to do some heavy number crunching. Scientists have estimated that there were 17 women to every 1 man during this bottleneck. Now, historically, anthropologically, genetically, given sufficient time, the male to female ratio remains approximately 1:1. Now, since we had estimated that the population 7,000 years ago, around 5,000 BC, would have been 20 million, that would come to about 10 million men and 10 million women, because the ratio we would expect is 1:1. But from there, it came to 1 man to 17 women, a massive drop in the ratio. Let us talk a little about the actual numbers during the bottleneck. Now, since the bottleneck is only in the Y chromosome, it means that it affected only the men. That means, whereas the 10 million women would not have reduced in numbers, the men would have had to be reduced to just a little more than 500,000 for the ratio to come down to 1:7. And that works out to about 9.4 million men suddenly gone out of the gene pool. 10 million men in the beginning, 9.4 million men gone. Now, this is mind-boggling, shocking, and very difficult to make sense of. So let's look at it in another way. It means that out of 10 men, 9 men were gone. How could that happen? Let's picture this. 10 men start a fight unto death. 5 pairs fight until one in each pair dies. One is left standing. The remaining fight again. And this goes on until, in the end, there is only 1 man left. This is basically what the Y chromosome bottleneck is telling us. Literally, last man standing. You would say, okay, but how? There needs to be a big fight or several big fights, wars, for such a thing to happen. And such wars have to happen across 3 continents. And they have to be massive enough to wipe out 9.4 million men. How is it even possible? And I agree, your confusion was mine too in the beginning. When we spoke about the area, 85 million square kilometers, with 20 million people, the average density works out to about 4.25 people per square kilometer. All of them experiencing similar fratricidal wars at around the same time stretches coincidence beyond the realms of believability, doesn't it? Does it make sense to think that a big, massive war or several wars happened in 3 continents at the same time? Can we make sense of it? I can help you make sense of it. Let's move on. Now, could such wars have been possible in the Stone Age? That is another question we need to answer. Could so much of the male population have been wiped out using Stone Age implements and weapons? Really? The answer is an emphatic no. There had to have been weapons which were much, much more lethal than what we currently accept as Stone Age implements. This couldn't have happened with just Stone Age implements and arrows. Think about it. Hand-to-hand combat, stone daggers, maybe wood and stone maces, crude bows and arrows. Each kill would mean ferocious fighting, skill and time. I mean, when we try to put ourselves in such a battlefield mentally, we realize that with just 10 men, it would take a long time, very long time, a lot of effort. And all the while, the women and children were silent spectators. After grappling with the impossibility of making sense of all this without deviating from what we currently accept as facts, it became clear that we need to think a little smarter. That is when I was forced to think of the Mahabharata. If you have got this far, I am sure that you are as intrigued by this as I was and eager to know the rest. So let's move on and solve this riddle. Now, there is no written history anywhere in the world that speaks of any massive wars any time in the human history. There is no archaeological evidence that can be associated with this scale of male annihilation. Now, evidence of the outcome is there in the form of the Y chromosome bottleneck, but the evidence of the event is not there. The bottleneck is real, which is what the researchers told us, but the story, that's missing. Unless we expand the horizon to an area that scientists won't look at. And that is where our oral Itihaas comes in, the Mahabharat. It has been labeled as a myth by historians. Myth means fiction. And therefore, scientists will not even consider it when trying to find the reason for this phenomenon. Now, they might call it a myth. We call it Itihaas, which means this is how it happened. And that is why we are not restricted by the biases that afflict the scientists. Now, at this point, I would encourage you to look at this video here. This is my video where I talk about the scale of the Mahabharat in terms of the number of lives lost. Believe me, when you look at it and see the numbers, you will start coming around to my viewpoint. You might start understanding why I think that we need to look at the Mahabharat in terms of the Y chromosome bottleneck. Let me be very clear. I'd hate to claim that all this is my thinking. It isn't. A few years ago, I found a fascinating researcher who's been working on the dating of our epics for the last 2 decades or more. At this point, I would like to introduce you to this researcher, Dr. Nilesh Oak. Take a look at his bio on LinkedIn, and these are some of his books. Currently, I am exploring the Bhishma Nirvana and Sugriva's Atlas, and both are fascinating. Dr. Oak isn't the only researcher who is trying to date our epics, the Ramayana and Mahabharata. There are others too. And obviously, when there are many people, there might be differences in their opinions. I am not qualified to judge who is correct and who is not. For this video, I have chosen Dr. Oak's dating for a specific reason. This is because he has started pulling in information from other fields of science to verify his conclusions about the dating of the Mahabharat. When he started off, the astronomy references were the only things that he was looking at. And based on that, he had come to a conclusion that the Mahabharat war happened in 5561 BCE. 5561 BCE. Now, as his research progressed and he wanted to expand his verification, he started looking into fields like oceanography. Now, as his research progressed, another new field came into existence, that is population genetics. Now, since he has brought all this together, and now there are 3 different researches. His research into the astronomical data in the Mahabharat, oceanographic data, which tells about rise and fall events of the sea levels, and the Y chromosome study from the genetic population genetics research. All these are coming together and telling something about the period about 7,000 years ago. Can you see why I am excited about this? The Mahabharata describes a catastrophic event that wiped out massive numbers of men. The Y chromosome data around the same period also talks about the massive destruction of the Y chromosome. Do you see why I feel that we should explore this more vigorously? Do you see why I feel that the Y chromosome research should not be an isolated thing, that we should look at it in the context of our own Itihaas? This body of research has identified a phenomenon. In our Itihaas, there is the Mahabharat, a war whose characteristics match exactly with what the scientists propose as the reason for the Mahabharat, reason for the Y chromosome bottleneck. A war fought at the same time has to be looked into as the causation of the phenomenon. Scientists won't look at it because in their eyes it is fiction. So it's up to us to start exploring this. Explore this phenomenon which hints at a solution for what is embedded in our genetic history. It is embedded in our DNA. More and more research is done. I am sure we'll be able to reach a conclusion about the relationship between the two. Believe me, I am not going to stop here. This is just an introduction. This is just an introduction to the possibilities that have been created in our minds regarding not just our Itihaas, but also science. I will be exploring other factors in this piece by piece, trying to understand where our Itihaas meets today's science. And I invite you to come back and explore with me when the next videos on this topic are released. In the meantime, don't forget to like, subscribe, and maybe if you know someone else who is interested in such topics, you might like to share this video with them. Thank you. Namaskar.